Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and this is going to be episode, I believe, 28. I'm recording this on December 8th at about 10:30 or so. And I want to give an update on the Israeli conflict with Hamas. So let's start with Fox News. I haven't started the spaces yet, but I will be.
Closing in on all of the Gaza territory to try and eliminate Hamas leaders and fighters who are still there. Troops breaching Hamas defense lines in Gaza's second largest city, where they are hunting for a senior leader of the terror group, believed to be hiding underground. Israel's military says it's killed about half of Hamas's mid-level battalion commanders, but the campaign is also taking a toll on Palestinians seeking refuge from the widening offensive. Trey Yanks is reporting on the ground there in southern Israel for us at this hour. He's got an update. Trey, what is the latest in Gaza right now?
Sandra, good afternoon. It's been 2 months since the October 7th massacre in southern Israel, and the war that followed rages on. Israeli forces now operating in the northern and southern parts of the Gaza Strip. Much of the fighting today taking place around the Jabalia neighborhood, also in Gaza's second largest city of Khan Yunis. We also know this afternoon, Israeli media reporting that Gadi Eisenkot, the former chief of staff in Israel, and a man that currently sits on the war cabinet for this country, lost his son in the battles. These are intense battles taking place as Israeli forces go after Hamas leadership. And as you've noted, many of those leaders are currently hiding underground. The Israelis say they are using their air force to support those infantry troops as they do push forward. They also say that they killed 2 top Hamas officials in the past 2 days. One of them, Abed Rantisi, the head of Hamas's observation unit, partially responsible for planning the October 7th massacre that took place exactly 2 months ago. This also comes as we're learning more about the 138 hostages still inside Gaza and the group that was released as part of that broader ceasefire deal just last month. One of those hostages that was released speaking out at a government meeting. I do want you to pull up her words here on the screen. She says, "My daughters are asking, where is daddy? And I have to tell them that the bad people don't want to release him yet. You are placing politics over the return of the abductees." Currently, there is a lot of tension inside Israel and frustration.
Let's get straight. Almost like 99.9% of the hostages are ultra liberals in Israel. All right. Secondly, a lot of them don't follow the precepts of the Torah. Thirdly, they were part of a larger group that was supporting desecrating the high holy days right before October 7th during Yom Kippur in Tel Aviv. All right. Either tangentially supporting or direct supporting. And finally, this war cannot be conducted based on worrying about the hostages. It's not, let's reread this. You know, this is the wife of a Hamas hostage speaks out. All right. So, she's an Israeli and she has a hostage that Hamas is holding. Her husband is being held hostage. All right. My daughters are asking, where is daddy? Okay, they're young. They're concerned. I get that. And I have to tell them that the bad people have them. No, the crazy fucking terrorists named Hamas. And won't let, and don't want to release him yet. Probably because they're ill-treating him. You are putting politics over the return of the abductees. Oh, it's politics. No, you want your husband to come back, but you don't really care about the long-term effects, especially of the generation that will have to clean up the mess because you are kicking the can down the road, such as your daughter. Your daughter might have to deal with a worse situation because you were too worried about your husband. I know that sounds cold, but that's the reality of this. People need to wake up.
With decisions made by the government and how many hostages they've been able to bring home. We spoke with that woman's brother just yesterday, and he had this to say about the situation.
The people that are dying piece by piece there as we speak. And we know that both of my sisters told us that when they were there, they said we were
Just
sure.
look at, and I used to play guitar for 19 years. All right. So I'm not, being, I'm trying not to be too aggressive with this guy, but this guy is not a religious Jew. For sure. This guy is falling in he falls in this ultra liberal crap that's tearing the country apart.
That Israel gave up on us.
Yeah. Israel gave up on us. Here's the bigger theme here. Zionism was actually, see, a lot of people don't really understand Zionism at all. All right. Zionism, in its purest form, was trying to actually water down the religion, water down orthodoxy, try to get the Orthodox people to move towards a less religious lifestyle. That's what Zionism is. But you got the non-Jew thinking they know what it means. They think that they know it. But the reality, there has been an orchestrated effort to actually diminish following the precepts of the Torah. It was a left-wing actual agenda that was heavily financed. And it was supposed to be a multi-decade process. That's Zionism. And that individual that they were interviewing is a representation of it. Oh, Israel failed us, even though we are liberal and not following the precepts. And oh, by the way, had a curse that took place on us on October 7th, but it was Israel's fault, not our, particular way that we have conducted our lives. Yeah. And that, because you're not bringing back the hostages, Israel must be at fault. Where's the accountability of how you were following the precepts of the Torah? Where is the understanding that you have to get the job done or future generations are going to have to pay a larger price in blood and in treasure? Don't trust the liberal Jew.
We often talk about the airstrikes and the bullets inside Gaza, but this is a story about the people, so many families across Israel, still waiting for answers about their loved ones. Sandra?
Trey Yanks reporting from southern Israel for us at this hour. Trey, thank you.
It sounds harsh, but that's the reality of it. The ultra-liberal Jew is at fault, and they're being self-centered because they believe in this whole idea of egoism. So all these non-Jews that think they understand what Zionism is, you really don't understand what Zionism is. All right, this is Fox Business.
See everything from miles away with this powerful U.S. Special Forces device. This new military monocular is basically a $3,000.
We're joined now by Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. Sir, is Israel winning the ground war?
Hi, Stuart. Thanks for having me this morning. Yes, they are. And I think they're doing a pretty good job of it. They've now moved to the south. They're in the intent of eradicating Hamas. Look, where they're not being helped, they're not being helped by a lot of the alliance nations to include, the United States. The United States needs to back off any criticism. This is a tough fight for Israel. It's to me, it's an existential fight for them, the eradication of Hamas. Here's where the United States can help the offensive that Israel is conducting inside Gaza. The president can pick up the phone and call Emir al-Thani in Qatar. And that's where the Hamas leadership actually is there. And he can actually say, look, we don't have any access to the hostages. Those over 100 hostages, 8 or 9 Americans that are hostage. Remember, they killed 31 Americans on the 7th of October. And actually penetrate the leadership and say, tell us where they're at, what's happening. My concern, though, Stuart, is you're not going to see a lot of these hostages come out alive, especially the women, especially those that have been abused, and you've seen the videos of it. So my point is, back off, let the Israelis finish the job. It's a tough job. They need to eradicate Hamas and then figure a way into the future of how they rebuild not only Gaza, but any type of relationship with the Palestinians. It's a tough fight. It's a hard fight, but I think they're doing quite well.
If there was another ceasefire of any kind, doesn't that simply allow Hamas to rearm, regroup, and come back?
Stuart, you're absolutely right. There should be no more ceasefires. This thing is endgame. Don't go there anymore with the ceasefires. I need to pause. That's the reason why the president needs to pick up the phone and call the Emir of Qatar, al-Thani, because I
think he's general. Again, which general will win a war? But he's half right. He's not going enough. He's focused just on the Gaza Strip. You have to go after Hezbollah and Iran. This has to be a regional conflict that the United States provides air support. And then you will have lasting peace in the region when you destroy Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. And then you start the negotiations of moving the Palestinians out of the West Bank, out of Jerusalem, and into Gaza. And then it's a two-state solution.
the Hamas leadership that is sitting in conducting these strikes in Israel, and he needs to get involved with it because they need to have a complete listing of the hostages to help out not only the Americans but who's kept in captivity by Hamas. But back off from the criticizing the Israelis and in their fight. Look, it's a tough fight. Anybody who's been in the military, in the infantry, knows how hard it is to fight in a built-up area, and the Israelis are doing it, and they're doing quite well. So I'd say, look, back off, let them do it, let them finish the job. To them, this is a biblical fight. It's a fight to extinction, and we need to support them getting there. Let's be very, very clear. What Hamas did on 7 October, to me, crossed a moral servitude line. They have crossed a line that we thought we'd never see again after World War II. And we actually said never again. Well, it happened again. And we need to let, I believe, Stuart, the Israelis finish the job.
I hate to say this, General, but hostage taking is a very effective strategy when you're fighting a conventional power like Israel. It is effective. I hate to say it, but that's reality. Last word to you.
Yeah, I know you have to block that out, Stuart. I hate to say that. I know it sounds harsh, and I know it's very, very hard. But if you're a military officer and you're conducting a campaign like the Israelis are, you cannot think about the hostages anymore as a primary effort. You've got to consider eradicating Hamas is the prime goal. And that's the reason I'm very concerned. We're not going to see all those hostages come out alive, or we're not going to see a lot of them even come out at all, especially the women, because they've abused those women. They don't want to release those women. So this is one of those when you have to turn a blind eye to the hostages, finish the job. Hard to say. I know it. It's a tough fight, but that has to be done.
General, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We hear you. We appreciate you being here. Thanks a lot, sir.
I agree with most of what he was
We're
saying.
giving away free Donald Trump gold bars. Folks, we're doing a special
I don't
Black
even know
Friday.
why Donald Trump is giving out gold bars. I mean, come on, dude. I mean, God, that's a little cheesy. Let's do another Fox.
Smoke filling the air near Israel's border with Gaza as the Biden administration urges Israel to do more to protect civilians there.
Greg Palcott live in southern Israel with the very latest, Greg. Hey, Todd, Carly, we are now into month 3 of the Israel-Hamas war. And from our vantage point here, just about a mile from the Gaza Strip, we can tell you it is intensifying. Just in the past couple of minutes, we saw Hamas-fired rockets right over our location. Luckily, the Israeli Iron Dome defense system seemed to have knocked them all out of the sky. Israel reporting some 450 Hamas targets hit in Gaza in the last 24 hours. We've been seeing signs of that again by the air, by sea, by land, through the night here in southern Israel. We heard the constant pounding of artillery aimed at the terrorists. Most treacherous, though, guys, this massive Israeli ground operation, especially in southern Gaza. That's where the Hamas stronghold is believed to be. There is house-to-house fighting. 2 more Israeli soldiers today killed, bringing their casualty toll in this phase of the fighting to 92 soldiers. Of course, civilians in Gaza taking a huge battering as well. One-time safe areas to which they fled now being hit. Hamas-run health ministry totals put the death toll at over 16,000. More aid now being promised by both Israel and the United States. By the way, Todd and Carly, Secretary of State Blinken recently said there is no deadline for Israel to finish up its operation here, but this is an important but. He expects major fighting to be finished within a month. That means early January. Remember, also waiting those 130 plus hostages inside the Gaza Strip behind us, including, it is believed, 8 Americans. A lot of people watching.
The assumption is that Hezbollah and Iran don't get more involved. I think they will. And Israel needs to go all out. This idea that this is just the Gaza Strip conflict is being a bit naive. And since this is PNN, I'm going to commercial. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver gel. This is in an easy dispense container. It's great to carry it in a bag. This will neutralize pathogens. You put it on your hands, stays active for 5 hours. You can put it around your mouth, around your nose, around your ears, around your eyes. You can also use it as a skincare product. It's a great product. It's at 35 ppms, so parts per million. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the silver gel. I also have silver solution. This one is a 30 ppm. I also have a max 35 and a max 14, which is 35 ppms and 14 ppms. So please get this product, or get the max 35 or max 14. Take a teaspoon of it a day. If you are not feeling well, take a tablespoon a day or 2 tablespoons a day. All right? Swish it in your mouth, gargle it, and then swallow it. And what it'll do is it'll neutralize pathogens. All right? And if you're sick, it'll help to clear that soreness and that, and that overgrowth of pathogens. So please take my advice. This is part of the anti-aging protocol. Take it every day. I take a teaspoon of it every day. If I'm not feeling well, I'll take a tablespoon or 2 a day. I have 5 different types of structural nano silver soaps. These products are great for the holiday season for someone. So please go to the store, pick up a few silver soap bars. I have it in lemongrass and peppermint and charcoal tea tree, right? So please go to the store and pick up the great structural nano silver soaps. I also have another type of silver gel. This is a 24 ppm. This is in a tube, and you apply it the same way on your hands, around your mouth, around your nose, around your ears, around your eyes. It'll neutralize pathogens. In addition, you can heal your skin from abrasions and cuts and minor burns. They'll help with acne. If you put it on your skin every night and exfoliate in the morning, you'll notice that your skin is better. So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the products that I offer, especially the structural nano silver products. Back to the news. This is PNN.
Extremely complicated. Great Palka, thank you.
All right. Now let's go to another Oh, I like this one. Let's try and do this one.
Make the holidays sweeter with a gift that's been made with the finest ingredients for over 100 years. Russell Stover chocolates. Make happy.
Finally tonight, one of the Israeli military's biggest targets is a top Hamas leader in Gaza who's accused of being a mastermind behind the October 7th assault. Brian Todd takes a closer look at his background.
One of Israel's top targets, the man they call the face of evil, Yahya Sinwar, Hamas's highest-ranking leader inside Gaza. Top Israeli officials have sounded very confident in recent days that they'll kill him, saying their forces have encircled his house in southern Gaza.
His house is not his fortress, and he can escape, but it's only a matter of time until we get him.
Without elaborating, Israeli officials say they believe Sinwar is underground. Such is the existence of the 61-year-old who's imprinted his hatred of Israel into the identity of Hamas. Analysts say as one of Hamas's top masterminds of the October 7th attacks.
Yahya Sinwar to Israel is what Bin Laden is to the United States. And like Americans went after Bin Laden and eventually got him, I think the Israelis will do the same, and this war will not end until they get Sinwar.
Sinwar joined Hamas in his 20s, arrested by the Israelis for the murders of 2 Israeli soldiers and 4 Palestinians. He spent 23 years in an Israeli prison, learned Hebrew, and it was during that period that the Israelis actually saved his life.
The tumor was discovered in his head. Israeli doctors operated on him, took the tumor out, and he survived.
Michael Kubi, a former officer of Israel's Shin Bet security agency, says he interrogated Yahya.
This is very similar, but different, but similar, in the vein of Arafat. Sharon, I believe it was it might have been during the Yom Kippur War. I think it was the Yom Kippur War in 73, but it could have been 48 conflict. Had the opportunity to kill Arafat on the battlefield and decided not to. And regretted it. All right. Well, here we have another guy where Israel saved or, freed because he was in prison and then he was part of that large hostage exchange for one Israeli soldier. I think it was like 1,000 to 1 ratio. And now he is rearing his head up again. And Israel probably should have killed him. But, remember what I said about fib sequences in history? Stuff rhymes. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar because of the spiraling of a curve. As it's turning on itself, it's similar to the previous curve. So this is another reminiscent moment where it just reminds me of Arafat.
Sinwar for a total of about 180 hours. Kubi says he knows Sinwar better than Sinwar's own mother and describes him as the cruelest man he ever met, known to use a machete to kill Palestinians who were suspected of collaborating with Israeli intelligence.
I asked him, you are now 28, 29, and how come he's not married? How come he doesn't want a family? So he told me the Hamas is my wife, the Hamas is my child, the Hamas for me is everything.
Sinwar was among more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners released in 2011 in exchange for captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Just last year, he seemed to warn Israel what was coming.
We will come to you, God willing, in a roaring flood. We will come to you with an endless number of rockets. We will come to you in a flood of soldiers without limit. We will come to you with millions of our nation.
Analysts say the man who survived an Israeli assassination attempt in 2021 won't be easy to kill this time either.
If there's someone
when he had that speech last year, why didn't the Palestinians, the fathers, the mothers, said, we want this to stop. We don't want the Hamas to, cause further destruction and war between the Palestinians and the Israelis. They didn't do that. They didn't stop it. They heard it. They let it, they fueled the flame. I'm telling you, the Palestinians are just as complicit as Hamas in many regards.
Information to the Israelis. He usually knows who they are, and he takes them out before the Israelis get to him.
Analyst Hussein Abdul Hussein says if and when the Israelis eliminate Yahya Sinwar, it's unlikely that whoever might try to fill those shoes will be as brutal as Sinwar. But even if it's someone more moderate, he says, it really won't matter given how determined that Israel is to take out all of Hamas's leadership.
What's happening in the Middle East is likely just the beginning, potentially marking this.
All right, now let's take a look at this. Was 23 hours ago on CBS.
Israel's military saying it surrounded the home of the leader of Hamas in Gaza. Israeli troops are hunting for him, and additional Hamas commanders. Of course, the difficult part is finding them there amid the civilians and possibly in tunnels. The military, meanwhile, has been continuing its bombardment of targets in southern Gaza, where many civilians, of course, fled when the war escalated in the north. Charlie D'Agata is tracking all the fighting for us. He joins us now.
The southernmost border town of Rafah was considered one of the safer places in Gaza. Now engulfed in Israel's unrelenting march to conquer the entire territory. This is Rafah this morning. Hamas health officials have updated the overall death toll in Gaza to more than 16,000, adding one more little girl to that total today. Inside a hospital in the southern city of Khan Yunis, frightened 11-year-old Saba Magnum desperately searches for her father and siblings. She says they were all inside a school that got hit. Then the sheer relief when she finds everyone alive and they're reunited. Outside, the Israeli military says its ground forces are in the heart of the city, said to be a Hamas HQ and home to the alleged mastermind of the October 7th massacre, Yahya Sinwar. Hunting down terrorists like Sinwar was once the role of a former commander of elite special forces, Doron Avital. Could he be there?
So I'm not sure what to think about Sinwar, whether he will be fighting to his death or whether he's sneaked
I'll
out.
tell you what, I'm sure he'll fight to the death, but Sinwar, I think is how it's pronounced. That will be a glorious day when the Israelis fucking kill that fucker.
And tonight marks the first night of Hanukkah, less a time of celebration this year than a period of hope and reflection, including events that shine a light on the fate of the hostages still held captive by Hamas.
All right, let's drop into Al Jazeera because, you know, Al Jazeera is non-biased news.
He said they can't scale up the aid. His Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs has basically said they can't conduct humanitarian operations anymore. They can do what they can, but they can't have a proper humanitarian plan because of the endless bombardment by the Israelis. He's also saying
This is horse shit because they have gone on multiple mainstream networks, news networks, and they have these flyers that are dropping, and they have these QR codes on where to go, what sectors, even in the southern area, what sectors to go where they will not do where the Israelis will not do operations, so the civilians can be safe. And the NGOs and the international community that's trying to help can go to those areas and make sure that supplies and provisions are in those sectors. That's a fact. To say that they're just they're not carpet bombing. They're sector bombing. You know? And again, Israel needs to get the job done.
worrying that he feels that the next stage in Gaza could be starvation, disease, and a complete breakdown of public order.
Well, the UN Secretary General did have some critical, strong words of condemnation for Hamas, but it was interesting when the Israeli diplomats spoke,
he spoke of the root cause of the conflict being Hamas. What he didn't mention is the decades of occupation, what international human rights groups and Israeli human rights groups like B'Tselem call apartheid. None of
people need to get this in their thick fucking skull. The international community to tell the Israelis where the borders are that have been promised by God, that's been written for thousands of years in the Talmud and in the Torah, all right, and has been expounded upon in other safers. The reality of the situation is that those borders have been circumscribed in the Torah for thousands of years. The Palestinians have zero right to that land, period. Full stop. The international community telling Israel where the border should be is actually saying that their decision is superseding God's covenant. Now, I'm really sure that that's going to go really well in the upper sphere, in metaphysically. Negating God's demands, really think about the hubris of that statement that this guy has, and the statements that are coming from the UN, that they're going to negate the covenant. Yeah, that's going to bode really well. See, what's going to happen is that these liberals and the ultra-liberal crowd are going to be eating their tail, and there's going to be a curse that's going to be coming down through the Or Ein Sof. I've explained the metaphysics of this on multiple times on different videos. But the thing is that this premise that he has is a false premise. That you're supposed to negate the covenant? I mean, come on, get real. The Palestinians are about a people of 2 to 3 million, right? They can be absorbed in the other nations quite easily. They don't want it because Esau wants the jewel, and that jewel is Israel's, and that jewel is the Temple Mount. It's about the Temple Mount. Now tell me anywhere in biblical texts where the Muslims were given the Temple Mount. And oh, by the way, you really want to get down to, let's say, some history here, and you want to negate the covenant. Why didn't the Christians win the fucking Crusades? If they won those Crusades, we wouldn't have this problem. If they took down the Dome of the Rock during the Crusades, we would not have this problem.
in the picture of why we have conflict in this region?
No, it all starts in the Israeli speech and in all the arguments you hear from the Israeli government. It all starts on October the 7th, nothing before. And in fact, at a previous meeting of the Security Council, the Secretary General said that this didn't happen in a vacuum. And that's the first time that the Israeli ambassador and then the Israeli foreign minister called for the Secretary General of the United Nations to resign. They don't seem to be repeating that call today, I think, because they fear it will alienate countries around the Security Council. But Sammy, from everything I'm hearing, is the only country really that needs to be influenced on the Security Council right now is the United States. I think.
Say hello to Symbiotica's activated charcoal, a detoxifying, nutrient-rich formula that works to cleanse the body of environment.
Of the UAE resolution when it comes to a vote. That's what I'm hearing.
It was also notable that the UN Secretary General, I should say, spoke of the intense bombardment and hostilities, and the Israeli restrictions on movement mean that UN agencies simply can't reach people in need. The bottom line of this, I guess what he's saying is if there isn't a ceasefire, forget any humanitarian solution or aid or help in any shape or form. What does that mean then, James? No ceasefire, these people are just left to the wind.
I think that's the real danger, is that there will be no humanitarian assistance for them.
Why not work in the sectors that the Israelis said they weren't going to bomb? Oh, they're going to try to blame the Israelis, saying it's not safe, even though they said that there are safe sectors that they've carved out. I'll tell you, these people, you
The
can't
outbreak
trust.
of disease, there will be starvation. He said people are not getting enough food. I thought it was interesting, and I'm trying to get a response from the UN right now, that in the Israeli ambassador's statement, something I've never heard before, he says Israel would let loads more aid in. There's trucks and trucks and trucks queued waiting to go in, and he blamed it on logistical difficulties of an international organisation. It's the UN's fault that food and health supplies and fuel are not in Gaza. I'll urgently try and get some response from the UN to that, because that is certainly not what we've been told from every single part of the United Nations. The problem getting in is the permissions and the searches that Israel wants to do, and the very limited capacity of the Rafah border crossing, which is a bit of a choke point. There are obviously other ways. If Israel was allowed to open up its border crossings to bring in aid, which it's refused to do until this point.
James, take us through the process, which you know very, very well. You've covered the UN for a very long time. You know the ins and outs of that organization. What happens next? If this goes the way that people think, that the US will veto it, what happens the morning after for the whole diplomatic momentum that's been building up?
Well, I think first we must say it's looking like the US is going to veto, but that meeting this afternoon at the State Department
with Anthony Blinken,
and
foreign
ministers from, let me just remind you, there's Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, Egypt, the Palestinian Authority, and Turkey. They will all be meeting. So there is a chance that Secretary Blinken could be persuaded, but of course he's then got to persuade President Biden. But right now, as it stands, having heard what Kristen just said from New York, having spoken to Robert Wood, who's the acting US ambassador, the deputy US ambassador, because the US ambassador, Linda Thomas Greenfield, is currently on a pre-planned trip to Namibia. If they veto, you will have a situation where there is no ceasefire, where all of the things that we've raised, all of these awful possibilities are probably going to happen, and that will just put increased pressure on Israel and the US. And I think going back to this letter from the head of UNRWA, Mr. Lazzarini, the next bit of action probably will move to the other big organ of the United Nations, the General Assembly, which already we've seen has called for a permanent ceasefire, but perhaps there'll be fresh.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
The General Assembly has always been anti-Israel. This is going to turn out really bad for ones that are picking the wrong side.
Back this diplomatic momentum to move to the General Assembly, and then what can we expect from the General Assembly?
The General Assembly can't do anything. The way the UN Charter is arranged, the power sits on this with the Security Council. What the General Assembly can do is show the temperature of the world, what the world thinks. It showed it last time when the General Assembly voted, but I think the opinion of the world.
What does the world
global
think?
South,
The General Assembly doesn't like what God wants. The General Assembly doesn't like the covenant. The General Assembly wants the Dome of the Rock to stay up there. The General Assembly. The reality of the situation is that there are birth pains of a new era that's happening. All right? And we're the generation that's supposed to set in motion for the building of the temple. We're not going to benefit from it, but we're the generation that's supposed to set this thing in motion. And we need to get those borders back to the original form. The Muslims aren't going to like it. Tough shit. But it needs to happen. The international community doesn't like it. Tough shit. The international community are a bunch of liberals.
even stronger now after what they've seen. And I think a General Assembly meeting, although it can't change the US's mind, it can certainly show the US that the rest of the world is not at all happy with its position. If, of course, the US position stays as we think it is likely to be, with a veto on this resolution that is coming up a little later on in a second Security Council meeting.
James, stay with us. I want to keep you with us for the moment, but I do want to go to Tariq Abu Azoum. He's in Rafah in southern Gaza. And Tariq, I wonder if Palestinians even are able to follow, to know about what's going on right now, that there is this diplomatic battle going on in the Security Council that might determine life and death situations for many of them through a ceasefire.
Yes, some areas in Gaza Strip are following what's happening in terms of the level of diplomatic efforts that have been made by different regional and international actors in order to de-escalate the situation on the ground inside the Gaza Strip. Now, the majority of them, they hope that these diplomatic efforts might bring an end for the battling and the bloodshed inside Gaza, where they just had generally before depended on the Egyptian and Qatari role in terms of reaching to different short-term ceasefire that through it, the Palestinians managed to get a constant flow of humanitarian aid, including fuel and gas. Now, these efforts that have been made by all of those actors will help to at least to mitigate the situation on the ground, as Palestinians in the north and central areas of Gaza City are completely isolated from the world, as the Israeli intense bombing on those areas had destroyed the majority of telecommunication towers, and a very few number of residents that managed to get some backup source of internet in order to have a kind of very partial information regarding what's happening outside in terms of the shuttle negotiations and efforts made in order to end the confrontations that are taking place on the ground inside the territory.
Meanwhile, Tariq, we have got a situation going on there where UNRWA officials are talking about Gaza being on the verge of full-blown collapse.
Tough shit.
How desperate.
Tough
the
shit.
Search for
Let's launch thousands and thousands of rockets, kill 1,000 or more Israelis on October 7th, and don't be surprised that your whole society gets fucking destroyed. You made the decision. Now it's time to, live with the consequences. Tough shit.
like food and medical help that we heard the UN Secretary General talk about. How desperate is it tonight?
Yes, the situation in terms of the humanitarian conditions on the ground, in particular on the south of the Gaza Strip, is very dramatic and deteriorating every day as the number of humanitarian aid that are allowed to enter the Gaza Strip is still very limited and cannot match the needs of more than 2.3 million Gazans. We are talking about the north and central areas of Gaza City where residents are trapped there. They have been under very intense bombing for more than 7 weeks of fighting. And those people had received a very limited number of humanitarian aid trucks that had been partially accessed to the north and central Gaza. Now, the majority of aids had allowed to enter the south of Gaza, where people have become very populated due to the waves of evacuations. And there are more growing demands on the food items and products inside the Palestinian market. And with the ongoing blockade of the eastern areas of Khan Yunis, which considered to be the main central food basket for the Gaza Strip and for the southern areas, specifically the situation is deteriorating as the destruction of farmlands continues. Now, Gazans on the south are struggling to find access to food as they are forced to line up for long hours to have access to few loaves of bread, as they were waiting in the front of the doors of the United Nations warehouses to receive such humanitarian aid. And the number of people on the south who are receiving humanitarian aid by the United Nations is increasing as well. So they are forced right now to have very partial access to water, and they did not find a clean shelter as due to the increase of population on the south, where some people were forced to take shelter on public areas, living in a very small tinted camps on public areas, which retrospects all the memories of the Palestinian catastrophe in 1948, where Palestinians right now are facing and experiencing the same conditions.
All right, Tariq Abu Azzoum there.
Thanks so much for that reporting on the very bleak situation in Gaza, or despite that situation which we see unfolding. We heard a very different line and narrative from the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations. Let's listen in, remind ourselves what Gilad Erdan had to say.
Hamas exploits Gazans as human shields in hopes that civilian casualties will rise and the UN will call for a ceasefire. Do we want to be the actors in the show that Hamas has carefully crafted? It is always easier to pressure the law-abiding democracy as opposed to the terrorists who don't even recognize the existence of international law. But is this the right and just way to ensure security? Of course not.
All right, let's continue the discussion. We have here once again James Bays, our senior diplomatic editor. So listening to that sort of narrative, though, you get a very different picture when you read some of the reports that have come out, James, from international human rights organizations since this conflict kicked off. Bitchute, an Israeli group, an Israeli human rights organization, saying on October the 10th that a criminal policy of revenge is underway, referencing the order to prefer damage over precision, and saying there's no justifications for what it calls actions which constitute war crimes. You get a similar sentiment. You read what Human Rights Watch had to say on October the 15th, saying laws of war are not being followed. And Amnesty International similarly talking about how mass killings are taking place, violations of international law, in a statement on December the 5th, right? A very different narrative there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you, like me, Sammy, over the last 2 months, have been speaking to a lot of international lawyers. Well, I haven't found an international lawyer yet who I've spoken to who doesn't think in some way that war crimes have been committed here. And when I say here, I'm talking about Gaza. If there was no war in Gaza, the world's attention would be on the West Bank, because the situation is so bad. So many Palestinians, a record number of Palestinians killed this year by the Israeli military, but also a record number of attacks by settlers. None of this, of course, gets mentioned.
Sorry, James, I've got to jump in because we've now got the US representative speaking. Let's listen into what he's saying.
Atrocities and acts of terrorism. The United States, at the highest levels, has undertaken intensive diplomacy to save lives and lay a foundation for a durable peace. American diplomacy opened the way for the first trucks that flowed into Gaza with aid. In partnership with GETTR in Egypt, it helped reunite more than 100 hostages with their loved ones and dramatically expanded aid to civilians in Gaza during a 7-day-long humanitarian pause. Hamas, however, has a different set of goals. Its refusal to release young women hostages led to a breakdown in the pause and resumption of the fighting. This council's failure to condemn Hamas's October 7 terrorist attacks, including its acts of sexual violence and other unthinkable evils, is a serious moral failure. And it underscores the fundamental disconnect between the discussions that we have been having in this chamber and the realities on the ground. An undeniable part.
What has been transpiring since October 7th has shown that Hamas is Esau, and Esau is an animal. And the only way to deal with this crazy animal is to eliminate it.
That reality is that if Israel unilaterally laid down its weapons today, as some member states have called for, Hamas would continue to hold hostages. Women and children, elderly men, many of whom, according to survivor accounts, are being subjected to cruel and inhumane treatment. And as of today, Hamas continues to pose a threat to Israel and remain in charge of Gaza. That is not a...
And that's why Israel needs to get the job done. All war for a future where there's peace. See, this idea, oh, stop the war and we'll have peace, is the wrong philosophy. All war, absolute win, lasting peace.
that any one of our governments would allow to continue to remain on our own borders. Not after the worst attack on our people in several decades. For that reason, while the United States strongly supports a durable peace in which both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace and security, we do not support calls for an immediate ceasefire. This would only plant the seeds for the next war, because Hamas has no desire to see a durable peace, to see a two-state solution. Colleagues, I am pained by the suffering that we have witnessed over the last 2 months. Even when we as governments are compelled to take up arms and protect our people from the most heinous acts of terrorism and violence, war is tragic. It is tragic for the families of the hostages who await word on the fate of their loved ones. We are doing everything possible to free the remaining hostages and reiterate our expectation that the ICRC be permitted to access and provide medical treatment to the hostages held by Hamas and other extremist groups. The war is equally tragic for civilians in Gaza. The scale of civilian suffering is devastating and heartbreaking. Hamas intentionally embeds itself within civilian areas, but that does not in any way change the fact that how Israel defends itself matters. We have been unequivocal. Israel must respect international humanitarian law and conduct its operations in a way that minimizes civilian harm. To back up these words and help protect civilians, we have supported establishing a more effective humanitarian deconfliction mechanism with the UN, and we are monitoring its implementation. This is a moral imperative and strategic imperative. You can only win in urban warfare by protecting civilians. In every conversation, we also have underscored that Israel must avoid further mass displacement of civilians in the south of Gaza, many of whom previously fled violence. Civilians must be provided adequate time and opportunity to move, including through corridors that allow people to move safely from defined areas of hostilities. Israel must further ensure sufficient humanitarian support exists for displaced individuals. Finally, civilians displaced in Gaza must have an opportunity to return home as soon as conditions permit. There must be no enduring internal displacement or reduction in Gaza's territory. Under no circumstances would the United States support the forced relocation of Palestinians from Gaza or the West Bank. Although the extended humanitarian pause has ended, again, by Hamas's choice, we have been clear that humanitarian aid must not only continue, it must be expanded. We welcome the Israeli government's decision to open Kerem Shalom for inspections and screening of humanitarian goods. We will continue to be in touch with Israel to ensure this happens and on the timeline committed. We also welcome the Israeli government's decision to ensure the provision of fuel that meets requisite needs to sustain the humanitarian assistance operation, including vital civilian infrastructure. Both of these outcomes are a result of intensive U.S. engagement with all parties and are consistent with Resolution 2712. They lay the foundation to expand sustained, desperately needed humanitarian aid. Of course, humanitarian aid cannot be delivered if humanitarian workers are not protected. And all parties have an obligation to protect UN and humanitarian personnel. We offer our deepest condolences to all the families, friends, and colleagues of UNRWA staff who lost their lives since October 7th. Attacks against UN shelters and facilities are unacceptable. We have also continued to press that work journalists do in conflict settings is vital, and they too must be protected. Israel must avoid damage to civilian infrastructure like hospitals, power stations, water facilities, and telecommunications infrastructure. Regarding the regional dimensions of this conflict, we are concerned by the renewed violence along the Blue Line. Restoring calm there is of utmost importance, as is fully implementing Security Council Resolution 1701. Moreover, we condemn the recent attacks by Houthis against 3 separate commercial vessels operating in international waters on the southern Red Sea.
You condemn but you don't do anything about it. It's time to go all in. And anyone that says otherwise is a pacifist. And we know what happened with Chamberlain while he was trying to pacify Hitler and Nazi Germany with England.
Consistent with Iran's long-term support and encouragement of the Houthis' destabilizing actions in the region, we know that Iran was engaged in planning Houthi operations. Iran has the choice to provide or withhold this support, without which the Houthis would struggle to effectively track and strike commercial vessels navigating shipping lanes through the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. We welcome the Council's press statement condemning these attacks and underlining the importance of navigational rights and freedoms of all vessels in the Red Sea. We are engaged in intensive consultations with partners and allies to determine the appropriate next steps. The United States has also been clear
I'm telling
about
you,
the
the United
dangers.
States, when you see something like this, you need to hit and be forceful instead of trying to be diplomatic about this. And this is the problem we've had for many, many decades with multiple administrations. We need a forceful president that gets the job done and tells our enemies that if you fuck with us, we're going to kill you. It's very simple. You fuck with us, we're going to kill you.
The rise in extremist violence committed by Israeli settlers against Palestinians in the West Bank. Violent extremist settlers must be held accountable for violent acts. And so, the United States is implementing a new visa restriction policy targeting individuals believed to have been involved in or meaningfully contributed to undermining peace, security, or stability in the West Bank. President Biden has been clear. The Palestinian people deserve a state of their own and a future free from Hamas. And a two-state solution is the only way to guarantee the long-term security of both the Israeli and the Palestinian people. Members of this council advocating for resolutions have an obligation to explain how their proposals will break the cycle of unceasing violence and support the steps we all agree are necessary to lay the foundation for a more peaceful and secure future so that history does not keep repeating itself. Our goal should not simply be to stop the war for today. It should be to end the war forever, break the cycle of unceasing violence, and build something stronger in Gaza and across the Middle East so that history does not keep repeating itself. As has been the case since day one of this crisis, the United States will continue to use all its influence to encourage the reunification of hostages with their loved ones and the further expansion of aid to Palestinian civilians in Gaza who have suffered tremendous losses. We will continue pressing for the protection of civilians as Israel pursues legitimate military.
The only way a two-state solution is going to work is if the Palestinians are expelled from the West Bank and Jerusalem, and they're all put into Gaza. That's the only way this is going to happen. Now, it might be like a two-stage thing where it's like, eventually the expulsion will happen, but it's best through negotiations for a two-state solution that the West Bank is not part of the Palestinian state, nor should Jerusalem be. If the United States tries to play this middle ground that the West Bank is part of the two-state solution, this thing's going to collapse. And a curse will happen on the U.S.
And we will not give up on a future where Hamas does not control Gaza, which is untenable for Israel's and the region's security and the well-being of the Palestinian people. Thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco al representante de Estados Unidos por su declaración. Tiene la palabra.
And I now give the floor to the representative of Albania.
Thank you, President. I would like to start by
We do not support calls for an immediate ceasefire. The words there of the US Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations addressing this meeting of the Security Council called by the invocation of Article 99 by the UN Secretary General. Those were perhaps the key words and key message that many were listening and watching out for not entirely a surprise. He went on to talk about Israel's right to defend itself, but he did also mention that how Israel defends itself matters, saying you can only win in urban warfare with support of the civilians. Let's continue this discussion with
Al Jazeera, why don't you focus on the two-state solution that the United States is proposing?
Oh, because Al Jazeera and the Palestinians really don't want a two-state solution. They want the elimination of Israel. And here's the rub. This is why all-out war has to happen, and the biblical borders have to go back. And that includes parts of Jordan, parts of Lebanon, parts of Syria, obviously Jerusalem and the West Bank. The U.S.'s policy doesn't go far enough in terms of this two-state solution. Because if the United States was more focused on the biblical borders, then we will have a blessing. If we push a policy to try to play the middle ground, and it is carving out some of that promised land, then a curse is going to be coming down on the United States. And why do we fucking care about Albania?
Is our senior diplomatic editors. James, let's start with the obvious, important first one. Not a surprise. It does sound like the US is going to use its veto then. Is that what we should take away from that statement?
When you have an ambassador or a deputy ambassador in this case speaking to the Security Council with a clarity of their position as strong as that, and it's the US position all along, but he's repeating it very, very firmly, I think there's very, very little chance of them changing their mind in the next 6 hours before this vote takes place. Yes, we know that's that meeting of regional foreign ministers and Secretary Blinken taking place in Washington, D.C. at the State Department, but I think the US position has been decided. You are going to see in 6 hours' time a veto of this latest resolution, this resolution that was drafted by the United Arab Emirates. So far has 55 other countries which are co-sponsoring it. That's a third of the United Nations, but the US seems to be sticking to its guns. Now, something interesting from sources at the United Nations, we know that the US is likely to veto. We know that 13 members of the Security Council, we're told, will support this resolution. There's one other, and that's the UK. What is the UK going to do on this occasion? I'm told by some on the Security Council, and certainly my colleagues have been in New York, have been speaking to as many people as possible, that they think it's possible the UK could join the US in a veto. Because, of course, the UK is also a permanent member of the
How significant would that be?
It would be very significant because in the past, it's the US alone that's vetoed things on behalf of Israel.
So this is the UK trying to give the US diplomatic cover as well?
Potentially, but it's worth remembering that the UK has a long-standing position of trying not to use the veto, and it hasn't used the veto since 1989. That's more than 3 decades. So it'd be very, very interesting. Certainly the last time we had a US veto during this war was when there was a Brazilian resolution calling for humanitarian pauses, which eventually, some weeks later, was a similar resolution was supported by the US. On that occasion, the US vetoed on October the 18th, but the UK just abstained. So I think one of the stories when we do see this vote, perhaps it's not going to be what the US does, because I think he's just made it very, very clear. But what will the UK do?
Now, as you mentioned, this is not the first draft resolution put together in the Security Council about Gaza that the US has objected or vetoed or blocked one way or another, right? What happens? Is there hope for yet another? I think this is what, the 4th attempt or draft, if my counting is right?
Yeah, the problem, Sammy, is that basically it's been the same problem all along, is that what people have been pushing for, what the Brazilians were pushing for right at the beginning when they came up with their original draft of a resolution, is a ceasefire, is stopping the guns, silencing the guns, and that is supported by the United Nations and the Secretary General. But that is what is opposed, and you just heard the words directly from the US representative, Robert Wood, the deputy ambassador, one of the deputy ambassadors to Linda Thomas Greenfield. They are sticking with their position that Israel has what he said were legitimate military objectives. It hasn't finished the job. Effectively, it is saying it wants to get rid of Hamas, and the US is going to let it do that.
So the
Hezbollah and Iran need to be knocked out. I'm going to commercial because this is PNN. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get your vitamin C. This will prevent you from getting scurvy, so you don't look like a crazy liberal, and it'll help to improve your skin. Vitamin C is a major component for the cross-linking with collagen. So please, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get my vitamin C. It also has magnesium in it, and it'll help to boost up your immune system. Please go to my store and get the probiotic. You just saw me eat some hummus with this probiotic, all right? So please, go to the store, get the powder. You can put it in hummus, or you can put it in a smoothie, put it in water, put it in your food. But the bottom line is this: take a probiotic every day to improve your gut health. I have a great probiotic. I have 2 great probiotics on my store. So please go to the store and get those probiotics. Please go to my store and get the C60. This is a very strong antioxidant. It neutralizes free radicals so you don't age. People that grow older faster are rusting with the free radicals. All right? So the best thing to do is to soak them up. This is a carbon molecule that's 60 carbons that can soak up the free radicals, these reactive oxygen species that are charged. Okay, they'll soak these things up. All right. So what you want to do is take a teaspoon of this a day. I sell it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, and an 8 ounce configuration. You can get it in coconut oil or avocado oil. Take a teaspoon of it a day, swallow it, and you'll do it every day, and you're going to be neutralizing those free radicals. Now, some people would say, well, I thought vitamin C is an antioxidant. It is, but it'll only neutralize one free radical, and then the molecule's locked. This doesn't lock, and it soaks them up, and there's 60, and it recharges. So this thing is thousands of times more powerful than a vitamin C molecule. That's why it's so potent. So take this every day, and you're going to start seeing a major improvement in your cellular health. Because what happens is it's soaking up those reactive oxygen species, those free radicals, reducing the cellular stress, and improving the mitochondrial health, and your ATP will go up. Because the cells and the tissue are healthier, you're going to be, those tissues will be performing better. And over time, what you'll see is that you're slowly healing, and you're slowly aging at a slower rate compared to the peer group that's not doing an anti-aging protocol. The control group not taking the antioxidants like I'm saying for you to take, they'll be aging faster. And it doesn't take much. You can see a major improvement in your health within 3 months to 6 months. But the farther out you go with this, after a year, 2 years, 3 years, because there's a compounding effect, you'll start seeing that your body is healing, and that you're aging slower compared to someone that's in the same lifestyle and same age group that you are. So take my advice, get the C60. This is a great product. I take a teaspoon of it every day. Back to the news in Al Jazeera.
Diplomatic pressure, I mean, does it build up after a while, and we should expect another attempt at the Security Council? Bearing in mind that this meeting is only happening because of the position of the UN Secretary General, not because of Security Council members themselves.
Yes, but I think there would have been. I think the push from the United Arab Emirates for this resolution. And why the United Arab Emirates? They happen to be, at the moment, until the end of the year, actually, their term is up on the Security Council, they happen to be the current Arab member of the Security Council. So in many ways, these sort of resolutions, yes, they come from the United Arab Emirates, but they're from the whole Arab group at the United Nations. They're from the Arab League in many ways, and whichever the Arab nation on the Security Council pushed it forward. I think this resolution was coming anyway, but I think what has happened here is potentially, I think some of the Arab nations have spoken to the Secretary General and said, could you give this an extra push? Why are you not invoking Article 99? And he's decided that the circumstances on the ground, he says the humanitarian system on the ground, getting aid in, the whole system is close to collapse. We're close to famine, we're close to starvation, the death toll is unbelievably high. He's decided to trigger this mechanism.
James, is there something for us to talk about in terms of what the US Deputy Ambassador to the UN said about deconfliction mechanism with the United Nations, and another comment about welcoming Israel's decision to agree to open Kerem Shalom?
Well, we don't, yes, I mean, both of those things potentially might reduce the death toll, but it's not going to stop the death toll. They're going to still continue to bomb in Gaza and in southern Gaza and in places where they told people to go because they said it was going to be safe. Those two things, he said, look likely, but neither of them actually happened. Yes, it would make a difference potentially for the aid if the Israeli border points could be opened because they have the capacity to get many more trucks in. The official position from the UN, from the Under-Secretary General Martin Griffiths on this is that deal has not been done yet on the Kerem Shalom or Kerem Abu Salam.
The reality, on Al Jazeera, you have this ticker that's saying United Nations has said that there are no longer any safe zones for the Palestinians in Gaza. Meanwhile, for the last 48 hours or more, the IDF spokespeople have been saying we've been dropping leaflets and QR codes and been on the mainstream media and calling people and broadcasting that there are sectors, they're numbered, that certain regions need to go to a certain sector because the Israelis will not bomb that sector. But the United Nations is saying that there are no safe zones. While the IDF is saying, go to this sector and we're not going to bomb it. But if you don't go to the sector, don't be surprised that you get killed. The United Nations is not being honest.
The crossing, direct crossing from Israel into Gaza, because everything currently goes through Rafah, which is from Egypt into Gaza. He said at a press conference in the last 24 hours, we are still negotiating, but there are some promising signs at the moment.
Given, okay, all that is well and good, but given what we've heard from the UN Secretary General today, when he addressed the beginning of this meeting, and he said, I'm just looking to the actual statement here, he said here that the actual words he said were, the conditions for the effective delivery of humanitarian aid no longer exist. He had some very strong words about the difficulty, and I think we can listen to some of the statements he made just to remind us what he was talking about, the collapse of these mechanisms for delivering aid.
The conditions for the effective delivery of humanitarian aid no longer exist. The crossing point at Rafah was not designed for hundreds of trucks and is a major bottleneck. But even if sufficient supplies were permitted into Gaza, intense bombardment and hostilities, Israeli restrictions on movement, fuel shortages, and interrupted communications make it impossible for UN agencies and their partners to reach most of the people in need.
So, James,
what part of Israel's statement on October 7th and 8th, when they said that they were going to root out Hamas, did the international community not understand? Don't be surprised that Gaza is completely destroyed. The Palestinians should have prevented Hamas from reconstituting going all the way back from 2014 to being able to launch thousands and thousands of rockets, take hold of their civilian population, embed their operations underneath the civilians, and voila, you have October 7th. The Palestinians were complicit. I mean, come on. And don't be surprised, international community, that actually a nation says, enough is enough, we're gonna start to kick ass. We don't care what you have to say, we're gonna get the job done. Because the international community almost always gets it wrong.
And to all of that and absorbing it, the US deputy ambassador is talking about, well, Kerem Shalom, Israel has agreed to open it, aid will get in. Listening to the UN Secretary General, listening to Philip Lazzarini, listening to many UN agencies, they're saying we simply can't get aid in. So what is the point of we can't deliver the aid if there's no ceasefire? What is the point at this point of just trying to ship more aid in if UN agents saying we can't deliver it without a ceasefire?
Absolutely. The bombardment continues. Yes, you can get the aid or some aid across the border.
No, this is the international community trying to force the hand of the Israelis and to do another ceasefire. And I don't even think that the Hamas and the hostages that they're holding are even in good enough condition to be able to release, because they'll show the atrocities of the conditions of how they're treating the hostages. Why didn't they release more? Is it because they impregnated some of these females that they captured? Raped them to the point where their uteruses are destroyed? You know, that's the type of people we're fucking dealing with. It's time to kick ass.
Through Rafah, which is limited in how much you can get it in, potentially. And as I say a moment ago, the deal has not been done for the checkpoint that goes from Israel directly into Gaza, because that's a much bigger place. That's where the trucks used to go in before the war. But then once you've got the other side, you've got to get that aid to people. And if people are cowering in the street, cowering in buildings or what's left of buildings, how do you get the aid in without without a great risk to the UN staff who try and distribute it? And remember, more than 130 UN staff have already died in just 2 months. That's the greatest death toll for the UN in the history of the whole organization, which of course
here's a great idea. Why doesn't the international community, through its NGOs and this supply for humanitarian aid, actually tell the Palestinians, we are not going to give it unless we actually can see the hostages and make sure that they're being taken care of? Because I guarantee you, Hamas will not allow that. Because they're hiding something. They're hiding something.
The UN chief said on Monday, he said that the current conflict between Israeli forces and Palestinian militants in Gaza, the world is witnessing an unparalleled and unprecedented level of civilian deaths compared to any other conflict since he became Secretary General. So it seems to be a consensus among UN officials that this is different. This is not on the same scale of other conflicts we've seen in recent memory.
Yeah, and that's, I think, why he triggered Article 9.
All these people are a bunch of dipshits. The reason why it's different is because a straw has broken the camel's back, to use a phrase. Metaphysically, this is very different. And we are the generation that is the stepping stone for ushering in a messianic era that we will not benefit from. But we are the generation to start moving it forward. So there's peace on this earth. But to do that, there has to be war and destruction. And the enemies of modern civilization need to be destroyed. And that is Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. They are Esau, and Esau needs to be killed. That's what they're seeing. But the thing is that all these commentators and everyone that's working at the UN think that they'll be able to do some sort of diplomatic agreement and peace that will be lasting. But it doesn't get to the root cause of the problem. And that is the covenant of the land and the rebuilding of the Temple Mount have to happen, independent of what humans think, independent on Orthodox Jews think, independent on what ultra liberals think, or even middle of the ground people. It doesn't matter what you think. It matters what is going to happen because of this metaphysical demand that is taking place, that has been written down for thousands of years. And even Jews that are on the liberal side, they don't even want to follow this demand. They're getting cursed. Don't you think that the international community in so many different ways will get cursed? Because the international community thinks that they're safe financially, with security, with their health. All three of those vectors are in danger zone. Are we really that secure? We're on the verge of World War III if we don't manage this thing right. Is our health really that secure? We got a serious thing happening pulmonarily, in this post-era crisis and aftermath and aftershock that is starting to emerge. Do you really think that your financial situation is that stable? You remember Lehman? And that's going to be a firecracker if there's a real curse that comes down on the international community because of how they try to peacefully negotiate this in some sort of Westphalian way that is antithetical to the actual precepts of the Bible and the Torah. And that the international community is going to actually supersede the covenant? Are you kidding me? You think that's really going to go down really well, metaphysically? Of course not.
That's why he thinks this is worse in the time frame that we've had it at just 2 months. It's worse than the other conflicts that the Israeli ambassador Gilad Erdan mentioned. He mentioned
it's worse. It's worse because the international community is not getting to the root cause of the problem, and it's all about the borders and it's all about the Temple Mount. That's simple.
He mentioned Ukraine, and why did the UN not trigger Article 99? The UN Secretary General not trigger Article 99 for those. And it's because the Secretary General of the United Nations, who has been doing this job, he's in his second term in the job, he believes this is the worst thing he's seen. And remember, this is a very experienced man. He was the Prime Minister of Portugal. He was the head of the UN's refugee agency before he did this job. And this is the worst thing he's ever seen.
All right, James, thanks so much for talking us through everything that's happening.
There's a metaphysical situation that is coming down that I said that was a big cloud. I said this multiple times months ago, that there was a cloud that was going to come around the world, and it was going to start on December 1st. And it was going to get worse and worse and worse. This is way before October 7th. I had no idea what was going to happen, to Israel. I thought it was more related to just the aftershock of the pandemic. But it's much bigger. That pandemic is a subset of a larger thing that's going on. And the world's being tested. And all these experts saying they had never seen anything like this. Yeah, no kidding. Because the last time you saw something like this was actually in the Bible.
Process is continuing in the UN Security Council, so no doubt we'll come back
to make another point. Don't you think that Pharaoh and all of his, back in the biblical times, Pharaoh and all of his aides and gurus, right? His priests, when they started seeing the plagues that were being mentioned by Moses, I'm pretty sure that his advisors, Pharaoh's advisors, would say, "I've never seen anything like this before." Yeah, no shit.
for now. Let's go back to Kristen Salumi. She's at the United Nations headquarters. So, Kristen, talk us through now what kind of reaction are you hearing from Security Council members, from UN diplomats, now that we've had the US Deputy Ambassador basically say what you said you thought he was going to say?
Right, we've been hearing from a number of council members reiterating the urgency of the situation and highlighting the fact that most council members feel that there is a
God,
need
there's nothing that she's going to say that's really that intelligent, so I might as well interrupt her. A lot of these council people actually came out of the Kennedy School out of Harvard. I just did a video yesterday about how incompetent the presidents at MIT, UPenn, and Harvard, and the other elite schools are in dealing with the crisis that is happening on their campuses with wokeism and this ultra liberal crap. And don't you think that these ambassadors to the UN that are coming right out of the Kennedy School, out of Harvard University, you think that they're really going to be conservative? Do you know what? The escort services sales increase every time they do a General Assembly at the UN in New York. So what kind of people are we really dealing with here? Are we dealing with people that are really family oriented? Are we dealing with people that really care about kids? Are we dealing with people that are really above board on really being good humans? The answer is no. And that's a fact.
To get involved and to act. Right now, France is speaking, the ambassador there, saying that it's time for a lasting ceasefire in order to get this humanitarian situation under control. We heard from Malta also saying the time to act is now. So the pressure and the sentiment for action continues in the UN Security Council. Even as we know behind the scenes, the pressure continues on US officials as well. And what James was saying about the impact on humanitarian operations for the United Nations, it is clear that this is a personal question for the UN, that they cannot protect their own workers. If their own workers are dying with their families as they deliver aid, then how can they protect other innocents?
So follow my logic here. You have an international community that's basically saying their decisions supersede the covenant that has been around for thousands and thousands of years, and that all monotheistic religions know what that is, between this special bond between the Jewish people and the land and God in the temple. All monotheistic religions accept that. But you have an international community that's saying they supersede that decision, that covenant. And now you're surprised that your workers that are pushing an agenda that's trying to supersede the covenant, your workers actually get hurt. This is that logic of the ultra liberal chasing its tail and it's going to eat itself, right? And that there is a divine curse and a blessing that is taking place as the disentanglement is happening. You pick a side. You pick the right side, you're going to be blessed. If you pick the wrong side, your mountains are going to melt like wax. And you're seeing it playing out in real time. But they want to blame it on Israel. But they don't look in the mirror and realize their decisions actually caused the death of their workers. Just like, and people would say, oh, you're so pro-Israel, or you're so pro-Israel, Dr. Paul. The ultra-liberal Jew, because of their decisions that they made, especially supporting some of the crap that was going on during the High Holy Days, they were punished and cursed. So even Jews can be cursed by picking the wrong decision. That's why I'm saying that everyone is to blame. Everyone. Even the ones that are listening right now, the ones that are watching on YouTube right now, you're to blame too. The question is, how are you going to make yourself a better person to move this world into a lasting peace versus expedient, pragmatic peace? They are two different things.
In Gaza. And for that reason, many see this as a crisis, not only for the region in the Middle East, but for the UN and for international law itself, because the UN is not able to fulfill the responsibilities that it was set out to do. And that is some of the sense that we're getting from the speakers here as they continue to make their case.
And so many of them came from the Kennedy School, from Harvard University, with their wokeism.
Just now, we understand we're going to hear from a number of speakers, and then what we get to a vote in the next few, one assumes, minutes, hours. What are we looking at? And how long does that vote take? Or is there a possibility it could be delayed?
There's a distinct possibility it could be delayed. It was supposed to happen during this meeting initially. That was what we were hearing yesterday. As of this morning, the vote was delayed till this afternoon, in a few hours time from now. That happening after the foreign ministers from several Middle Eastern countries meet with Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Washington, D.C. But we also heard from the French ambassador before the meeting a call to delay the vote even further, suggesting that they did not think it was going to be a successful vote. The French ambassador telling journalists, what's the point of having a vote if the council is not united? We need to come together and find wording for a resolution that everyone can support. He called for a delay even further until next week if necessary. Of course, in that time, the bombs are continuing to fall. People are not getting the food that they need. The Secretary General,
I'll tell you, it would be
that
such a pleasant surprise to see an asteroid just hit the UN. You know, just one gigantic asteroid that's been floating out, you know, in space for, you know, a billion years, and then all of a sudden it just says, you know what, it's time to come home, you know, and, you know, it just, you know, settle the issue with the UN, because the UN is a group of people that are incompetent, they're on the take, and are morally deprived.
in some areas, 90% of families don't have enough food to eat on a daily basis, and there's no way to get aid to the people who need it. So really a lot of uncertainty right now as the situation gets worse, but no sign of that vote happening right now. It could be delayed indefinitely.
All right, thanks so much, Kristen. So we're there watching developments from the UN headquarters live for us from New York. And what we have been seeing live from the UN headquarters, of course, was a reiteration of the US position of standing with Israel and opposing the call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza.
And as of today, Hamas continues to pose a threat to Israel and remain in charge of Gaza. That is not a threat that any one of our governments would allow to continue to remain on our own borders. Not after the worst attack on our...
When you listen to the UN as they're speaking, your cortisol levels go up and your blood sugar levels will increase. To be able to control your blood glucose levels, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get ashwagandha. This controls your blood glucose levels, especially if you're, you know, stressed all the time. And listening to my channel might raise your blood pressure and your cortisol levels. So please go to my store and get the ashwagandha root that I offer. It is part of the anti-aging protocol because it's controlling the blood glucose levels and bringing down that inflammatory response at the vascular level. Back to Al Jazeera.
in several decades. For that reason, While the United States strongly supports the durable peace in which both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace and security, we do not support calls for an immediate ceasefire.
All right, let's bring in once again, we've got, of course, James Bays here, our senior diplomatic editor, but also let's bring in Marwan Bashara, Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. Good to have you both back with us. So, Marwan, if I could start with you. Listening to that statement from the US Deputy Ambassador, how do we interpret that? That's basically the green light for Israel to continue this campaign.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But there was more to it than that. I think this is one of those gotcha moments in U.S. diplomacy. There's two things he said, paving the way to rejecting the UN Security Council resolution. One, and both of them are problematic. One, he said, none of us would accept this kind of threat on our border. Gaza is not on Israel's border. Gaza is an occupied territory by
this is the point I'm
country.
making. The Palestinians, even in the contemporary world, let's say the last 150 years, if you want to use that arc of history, all right, has been nothing but a colony for the Western powers. The reality of the situation is this: the covenant with the Jews, written in the Torah and in the Old Testament, is forever binding. It doesn't get broken. And that there was going to be a time when a new temple is rebuilt, and a rebooting of the temple sacrifices, and a peace that comes down through this Or Ein Sof that I gave a detail on exactly how this works. All right. And there's blessing to all nations that takes place in this. But to get there, there has to be war and there's different ways to do this. There's three ways where the Messianic era happens. It's either defaulted to year 6000 in the Hebrew calendar, which is not that far away, 216 years away. Either through peace, where mankind decides to, be peaceful and have a peaceful resolution, and they can usher in the Messianic era that way. And through that peace, people are following the precepts of the Bible and the Torah. Or it's through people moving away from Torah and the Bible and being destructive people, and it's ushered in through war and destruction. Those are the three options. It looks like it's the latter option that is happening, because mankind doesn't want to be following the precepts, because we are stuck with ultra-liberalism that is eroding family units and destroying societies from within. Or we can have this thing default in 216 years. But it's going to happen. And this has been written for thousands of years on how this is going to play out. And so Esau, there's always been a battle between Esau and Jacob because they were twins. And Esau was the animal. He had the animalistic soul. He was smart, but he had an animalistic tendency. And that because he gave in to his physical desires, he sold his birthright to Jacob. Esau is a killer. That's part of his soul root. Well, Jacob is more kind of scholarly and, was, more trying to be a more of a pacifist kind of person compared to Esau, right? We're doing comparisons here. And that whole covenant line comes right from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to the 12 tribes to Moses at Mount Sinai, and the Torah comes down and the revelation happens. It didn't happen on the Esau line. And so Esau's descendants have always wanted what was rightfully Jacob's children. And there's always been a battle that's been going on. So this is a classic example where, well, the Palestinians, they should have the Temple Mount. They should, you know, it's theirs. No, it's never been theirs. And so this is the root of all of that whole problem. And until you solve this through Jacob's children fighting Esau's children, and it's the battle of the will, this is not going to be solved. And everyone's going to get wrapped up in it. So which side do you want to really pick? Do you want to pick, you want to be on the side of Esau? Because I bet you that if Esau wins and you're Christian, it's not going to bode very well for you. If you're on the Jewish side, there's going to be peace for all nations. It's that simple. It's of that magnitude. There's a simplicity in how I'm describing it, but there's a lot of hardship that has to happen to get there. You can see the goal. You can see where the solution is, but to get there is hard. It's hard. And that's why we're in the situation we're in. It's the battle of the will between Jacob and Esau. And even though I'm biased, I'm putting my chips on Jacob.
Israel's border. That's why under UN and Charter and international law, Israel has no right to defend itself in occupied territory, such as Gaza, which has been recognized, including by the United States, as an occupied territory. What's one? Two, and that's a bit of the 51st state argument, right? That a lot of people have been making, that Israel is not just another state, it's the 51st state of the United States. Because watch what he said just a little while ago. He said, our people. This is the first time.
That's interesting. Maybe we should listen to that. Let's play it out again. I think, do we have it ready?
I think he was just.
All right, we might have been sorry, Marwan. I jumped the gun a bit there, so keep going. But we will play out that soundbite again, because I think it's important what you're commenting on, and we should listen to it again. But momentarily, while they're queuing it up, let you go.
You know, there's this Israel. Anyone who knows Israel well knows that Israel spends a lot of energy trying to sound like and assimilated with the United States, because without the United States, Israel could hardly prosper. It couldn't even survive really in the Middle East without the assistance.
That's true. The United States is supporting Israel, but it's a flat out fact that the United States is also supporting the Palestinians. The Palestinians are bolstered up more so by the United States than the bolstering of the United States to Israel. Now, obviously, because of the arms deals that the United States and Israel makes, militarily, the United States really bolsters up Israel. But, you know, both of those nations, the Palestinians and Israel, would not be self-sufficient at all. So they need the funding from the United States, both sides. And the Palestinians would implode first because they're not very productive people.
The shielding of the United States. But be that as it may, now with the Biden administration the past 2 months have been parroting the Israeli lines. Sometimes you would think they were basically taking exactly the same words, phrases, and sentences and using them in their own statements. And now the U.S. envoy was saying, not for decades have our people, not the Israeli people, our people suffered such war.
Right. Well, I believe we do now have the soundbite ready to play out again. So let's listen in again.
He's talking about 9/11.
And as of today, Hamas continues to pose a threat to Israel and remain in charge of Gaza. That is not a threat that any one of our governments would allow to continue to remain on our own borders. Not after the worst attack on our people in several decades. For that reason, while the United States strongly supports the durable peace,
I interpret that as 9/11, and he's talking in that last part of what he just said. It's 9/11 and the U.S. citizens. That's the interpretation I have.
Which both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace and security. We do not support calls for an immediate ceasefire.
So quite significant that our governments and our people.
Our government is one thing. None of us could imagine that this would happen on our border.
He's reading into something that doesn't
Gaza is
exist.
an occupied territory. It's not just. It's not Mexico. Okay, it's not Canada.
Al
It's occupied territory.
Jazeera's senior
But the most
political
important
analyst.
part is when he talked about that we haven't had that kind of an attack on our people.
That's 9/11.
Israel.
It's 9/11. He's talking about 9/11 and the American people. That's what he's saying. He's reading it.
Israelis, not ours. These are not American. You know, Israel is not the 51st state. It's an independent
Yeah,
state.
just try to weave some logic into your stupidity. Come on.
So for the American envoy to actually echo the thing that we've been talking about for the past 2 months, is that you don't know anymore when it's the American speaking for America or when it is America speaking for Israel. It's just getting so confusing because Biden and Blinken and others have been parroting the Israeli.
It's real simple. If the United States sides with Jacob, it will be blessed. If it sides with Esau, it's going to be cursed. If you want to be blessed, you better start siding on, the good guys. You know, it's like, a big movie in the theater. You know, do you want to side on the bad guy side or on the good guy side? Usually, the good guys win. United States has been blessed in so many different ways, but it is in our power to screw it up. And we're starting to see our society unraveling because of moving away from the precepts of the Bible, the destruction of the family unit, destroying, killing kids in the womb. It's a problem. The wokeism. We need to move towards conservatism again. Doesn't mean that you have to be ultra conservative, but ultra liberal is definitely not helping the country. And who are these ultra liberals supporting? Terrorists, baby killers, destruction of the family unit, gender reassignment at such a young age, rewriting what the definitions of a word are in English. That's what we have. And if we maintain that path, there's going to be a curse. If you think I'm wrong, why is it that all these ultra-liberal, woke individuals were siding on the Palestinians and Hamas? Wake up. Wake up.
Cliches and sound bites and statements and phrases and so on and so forth, that now it's just they're even mixing up the facts, right? It's not just our borders, and certainly it's not our people that were hit the way they were
mixing up the facts. Don't you think the Palestinians are mixing up the facts by not remembering the covenant? Not remembering what happened on Mount Sinai? Not remembering what Esau was and is through his descendants? That's mixing up the facts, dude. But you're on Al Jazeera as a senior. Senior means experienced and has some wisdom, and some understanding, and some knowledge. I don't see senior in your analytical work, dude.
October 7th.
James, is it also interesting to look at how the US deputy ambassador spoke there when he basically called on Israel to take better precautions to protect civilian life, but the way that the US officials have been speaking about, it matters how Israel defends itself. Does it overlook the fact, that sort of rhetoric as if you are a complete detached third party and overlooks the incredible leverage that the US, not only leverage the US has, but in the words of the former special rapporteur of the United Nations for extrajudicial killings, Agnes Callamard, and she said on December the 5th, simply, US-made weapons facilitated the mass killings of extended families. That underscores, does it not, that the US is not simply a third-party observer here?
No, she's absolutely right. The munitions that are being dropped on Gaza are either American or they're paid for by America, nearly all of them.
Oh, what about the French selling weapons to Syria? Oh, what about Iran supplying weapons to Hamas and Hezbollah? Oh, see, there's a bigger, see, if you just tease out one thread of this, you don't get the, you don't get the big picture. You got to look at the whole sweater, all right? And the whole sweater is that there's this battle that's happening between the children of Jacob and the children of Esau. And United States is primarily, because of its Judaic and Christian background, is on the side of the children of Jacob, not of Esau.
A central part of this, and the US has a key role in this. The US senior officials, including the Secretary of Defense, have been there looking at the military plans. They've been not actually at the table of the war cabinet, but they've been consulted at every single stage throughout this.
And just if I may, you know, the American envoy also spoke about Iran and the Houthis. They invoked the question of what's happening in the Red Sea. Now watch again what the Americans are saying. They're saying it is not the Houthis that is responsible for what's happening in the Red Sea, it's Iran, because it's Iran, according in their words, because it's Iran that armed the Houthis. Well, if you take that logic to America armed Israel, America is making Israel capable of carrying those attacks in Gaza.
So it's the mirror logic of that argument.
Then America is responsible for what Gaza, for
America needs to take out Iran. Israel needs to take out Iran. And so you have allies that are working together to take out a common enemy. That's what's happening. How's that any different than, you know, the United States back in World War II was allying with Russia to try to destroy Germany. And Germany was allying with Italy. It's bigger than just, it's bigger than just about borders. You know, there's a metaphysical thing that's happening here. It's different. And this is the cloud that I've been telling people about for months that was going to spread around the world and affect many people. And that if you pick the wrong path, you're going to get cursed.
Israel does in Gaza, just as Iran is responsible for what the Houthis do in the Red Sea. And you know, the Houthis is basically in a failed state. Israel is not a failed state, not that I know. But Israel is so fully supported and armed by the United States, it wouldn't have been able to carry the kind of genocide it's carrying in Gaza. Now, bear in mind that this is not just about sending or dispatching arms. This is about shielding Israel as it is being shielded today at the United Nations Security Council. And this is about financing Israel as they've been financing it with more than $14 billion in addition to $38 billion of assistance. And it is certainly part of America providing every possible mean for Israel to carry on with its war crimes in Gaza. So certainly, just as Iran is complicit with the Houthis in Yemen, the United States is certainly complicit with Israel and what it's doing in Gaza. But also back to the idea of what's happening with the ceasefire, with the demand for ceasefire. I don't want to interfere in your own field of interest.
No, I think it can sometimes cross-fertilization between the great minds of art.
But I recall the United States abstaining or voting for 7 resolutions in 1982 that had to do with the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. 507, 508, 509, 511, 512, 513, 517. The United States either voted for or abstained, but it allowed 6 resolutions or 7 resolutions to basically call the first one and then confirm each one, the first one, 508, calling for a ceasefire after the Israeli invasion of Lebanon.
Okay,
so there was no problem for the Reagan administration at the time to kind of support Israel, but call for a.
You know, the thing is that, you know, you're talking about different times too. You're talking about a Cold War calculus that's much different back then than it is today. You know, you're talking about, you know, just getting out of Vietnam, and there was still this, you know, U.S. malaise. I mean, there's some. You can't just make those comparisons. There's a lot of detail that's there.
I think
I'm glad you're taking us a little step back in time to look at this. Might be the good time for us to just put things a little bit back in context and talk about the centrality of the US's role to the conflicts we've been seeing, as Marwan was talking about, not only in the Middle East, but also Gaza, and talk about President Joe Biden's position in particular. We all recall, of course, he made that trip to Israel in the days following October the 7th to show his unwavering.
A big part of why the United States is in that region and the UK is involved in that region is because of oil. All right. And the dynamic of the Middle East in a Cold War setting. Now, some of that has changed. The United States has more oil than the Middle East has, if we want to use it. All right. Especially, you know, you add in the fossil fuels that are in Canada. So North America has a ton of fossil fuels, more so than Saudi Arabia. So, or even the Middle East in general. But we didn't know that at the time. And so there was this, you know, there was this geopolitical play that was happening. But a lot of those assumptions have eroded. This is different now. I mean, there still are oil interests that are at play here. But I have mentioned on maybe a couple videos and people that I have talked to that I believe that China, the Chinese 21st century concept is not going to happen. And that we are ushering in the beginnings of a Middle Eastern century through the peace that is going to be built on this Abrahamic Accord agreement. And that means all these Arab nations, if they decide to make peace with Israel, and Israel will benefit greatly economically. And that there's going to be a late 21st century emergence that leads into the 22nd century that is going to be very Middle Eastern centric in terms of economic activity and blessing. And that the United States will benefit during this transition, but we're also seeing the twilight of the United States. The United States is starting to shrink, right? We will still be an important figure in the world, but our empire will start to diminish after we get through this major tumultuous world war event that takes place. And what's going to make the United States start going into its twilight years, very similar to what happened with UK with World War I, is this war with China. When we fight the first island chains, when it starts to heat up. We will probably win, but we're going to lose an awful lot to win it. It's going to cost us a lot financially and through our own soldiers, right? We probably will win it, but we're not going to emerge as a superpower anymore. We'll emerge as a lessened superpower. And because of what we do to China will be completely a devastation that it will guarantee that the 21st century China doesn't happen. And it will allow for the growth of the Middle East to move into the 22nd century as a major economic hub and growth, because it's right in the middle between Asia and Europe. And so it's going to deal with this economic activity that's going to happen. It's hard to see it right now, but that's where this is leading. That's the longer arc. And the United States has been given a blessing to be the yoke for this new era to happen in the 22nd century. Now, you know, a lot of people think, oh, that's BS and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I think that if you really think about what I'm saying, it makes a lot of sense and where this is going. Because you got to remember, the Temple Mount reboots default in 216 years, guaranteed. The issue is it can also be ushered in through peace by people following precepts and being peaceful, or it can be ushered in because society has gone so far off the rails that there's going to be an usherance of the Messianic era through war and destruction. So if you play any one of those scenarios out, you can see that the Middle East is going to be a major hub near the end of the 21st century and the beginnings throughout the 22nd century.
Support for the country, but as Paddy Culhane explains, that's come at a political cost for him.
From the beginning of the conflict, U.S. President Joe Biden has been consistent, often repeating Israel's justifications for its siege and bombardment of Gaza.
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children.
A damning statement from a U.S. president, except his aides later said it wasn't true. He didn't see anything, just repeated what he had heard in the media. When the Al-Ali hospital was shelled, within hours he blamed, quote, the other team, and he made sure to send a message of support in person. Indeed, sending 2 aircraft carrier groups to the region, and with assets, sending missiles, ammunition, and reportedly 100 bunker buster bombs to Israel, along with the pledge of more than $14 billion in additional assistance. About 3 weeks into the war, Biden was asked about the growing Palestinian death toll.
I'm sure innocents have been killed, and it's the price of waging a war, but I have no confidence in the number that the Palestinians are using.
He has called for restraint, but not condemned the lack of it by Israel's military. Asked for additional humanitarian aid, not demanded it. Biden heralded his role in getting a temporary ceasefire, but as the fighting began again, he reportedly told Netanyahu the military should not fight in the south with the same intensity they had in the north. It appears they did anyway. No public response from the U.S. president. Tens of thousands of people in the U.S. have held countless pro-Palestinian marches demanding he do more and pledging they will never vote for Biden again.
It's going to be a hard no for me. It's going to be a hard no. Yeah. Okay. Not to say I'll vote for the other party either, but I'm going to have to see if there's an independent candidate that I can get behind.
And it's showing up in the polls.
That would guarantee Trump to get elected, because what happened with Ross Perot was that he took away votes from George Bush and allowed in Clinton. So I hope I hope that there's a lot of people like that out there. And, you know, they think they're so smart, but when Trump gets in, I'll tell you, these ultra liberals' heads will explode. And all their brain tissue will be all over the camera on CNN. Because they just could not handle it.
American media keeps pointing out
he is 50 points underwater with the youngest group of voters.
Political analysts say this could cost him as he seeks re-election.
His support has decreased now to 17% of the Arab American electorate, So he's already losing a huge support among a key population, especially when we're looking at a swing state like Michigan, where Arab Americans and Muslim Americans make up a larger percentage of the electorate.
With just under a year until the election, Biden's team is likely hoping many will forget or vote for Biden because they dislike his opponent more. In a close election, that could be a costly calculation. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
All right, so let's continue the discussion here, both Marwan and James. And James, looking at there obviously is a changing dynamic as Patty's
I'm
package
going to do
points out there.
something different that I haven't done at least in a recording, and it's going to be kind of funny. So pay attention to what I'm going to do. Okay, we're going to start a new segment on PNN called Royal Watcher. Why? Because the whole world is going to hell, and we need to understand what's happening to Meghan and Harry. All right? Because they're important people. All right? Very important. So let's dive in to what's the latest and greatest on Meghan and Harry. This is the Royal Watcher.
So this is probably the weirdest thing you've ever seen come out of a Christmas stocking, but there's a reason thousands of men across America want one. This flexible gadget.
Here we go.
They are a brand, something that Harry has been told time and time again, normally through the fog, the haze, or whatever world he's living in, and perhaps whatever special cigarettes he suggested he may have used previously to relax. You get the picture. But you see, the bigger story is this. Once you have the things that you had that you thought were going to be successful diminishing very much by a return, then you have to look at what you've got left. And in the case of Harry and Meghan, as they showed this summer in the very heart of Germany, Dusseldorf, well, really this sort of, some might suggest, hijacked an event that necessarily shouldn't be about them, but are things now about to take a turn for, some might suggest, the worst. As ever, let me explain. Hi, good morning, how are you? Nice to see you today. By the way, in 1955, I always like to give you a little bit of knowledge, yes? Well, I know, we've got to learn. Keeps the grey matter going, doesn't it, On this day, our wonderful late monarch, Her Majesty the Queen, in 1955, gave an honorary peerage to the former Labour leader, Clement Attlee. Now, the reason why this is interesting is he was the very first member of the Labour Party to enter, if you like, the House of Lords, which was a big thing, most people in the Labour Party certainly didn't go for that, way beneath them, that sort of stuff. Just proves, of course, as I've often said even on the show, dangle a title and they'll come running. Do you know what I mean? Shocking, isn't it? Back as ever, though, to your breaking ball story of the day. Now, interesting, as we all saw when Meghan and Harry decided to, some might suggest, hijack this year's Invictus Games at Germany, in Germany, in Dusseldorf. We had, of course, Meghan turning up late, once again, creating chaos and, attention. She was late, she had the school run to do and getting milkshakes for her children. Nobody believed that, did they? But, that was Meghan again, basically saying, I can still act, and surely she did. She looked enthused throughout, even pretending to drink beer and whoop delightedly, And the bottom line is she upset a lot of people by, some might suggest, pushing herself forward to the front of the queue, again, by marching in front of the army veterans. Who was she in those shorts and sandals? What was that about, But of course, Harry was more than delighted. Now, as we know, there are problems afoot in the Invictus camp. Apparently, allegedly, monies and all sorts of problematic things that we are looking into as we speak. But more importantly, right now, they've decided to shoehorn in a chum of Harry's to try and take the reins of the next Invictus Games. That's how serious things have got. But behind the scenes, let me tell you, there's always something afoot. You see, Prince Harry, allegedly, alongside Meghan Markle, believe it needs to be better branded. And what better to brand it than the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's Invictus Games? Or, even better, Harry and Meghan's Invictus Games, because, of course, the branded experts that they now surround themselves with believe that this is a key factor in, of course, selling the brand internationally and taking it into territories that have never been before. Now, I have to say, as I've said before,
Meghan is a homewrecker and destroyed the royal family. I'll tell you, that woman, she is so self-centered, and she cannot get herself out of the media. She has to be the center of attention and everything. It's amazing. It's amazing. You would think that she was a Palestinian.
a big fan of this particular endeavor. I do feel that not enough focus is put on the brave ladies and gentlemen that gave so much of their lives and their time to protect us. And it is their moment. And I'm glad that they do look like they're enjoying it. So it's great fun for them, isn't it? You know? And I don't mean that to patronize her. It's just nice to see happy faces, right? But, you know, one wonders, one might suggest that how toxic could be Harry and Meghan's Invictus Games, or indeed the Duke and Duchess of Sussex Invictus Games. And is this the right move forward? And more importantly, would the Invictus board really like to see that? Apparently they believe that this could bring more money worldwide. It remains to be seen. But an interesting new process going ahead and being discussed. As ever, I'd love to know what you think to this particular story.
The current branding should be okay for the games because it's not tied to their own name directly. So it's not a self-centered, egoistic aspect. But by rebranding it, it's going to turn it into an egoism. And what did I say earlier in this video? I said egoism is going to be a problem. And you focus on egoism, and it may seem benign at first, but then it starts to be more malignant in the society. And, you know, they are representative of it. You know, and since this is such an important topic, let's just get one more video about Meghan and Harry as royal watchers. All right. This is really important. Meghan Markle might be dropped from Hollywood agency over Endgame fallout. Oh my God, what's going to happen to them?
I do not do a podcast, UFC event. I don't do anything without using the alphabet. Oh, that one's a little fishy. I don't know about that one. Everything.
There are reports that Meghan Markle could soon be dropped by her Hollywood agency.
No!
Following the fallout from Omid Scobie's bombshell book, Endgame. The Duchess of Sussex recently signed with William Morris Endeavour Talent Agency that also represents Serena Williams and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. But Meghan Markle's Hollywood relaunch may be stalled after revelations King Charles and the Princess of Wales were allegedly named as the two senior royals who questioned Harry and Meghan's son Archie's skin colour. That's in the Dutch version of the book. Royal expert Angela Levin has told GB News the reignited royal race row could have damaging effects on Meghan Markle's plans to re-enter Hollywood.
I've never really heard any really well-known agency be so clear about what they felt. They didn't mention the writer, they mentioned it in general. So I think Meghan needs to be very careful because a lot of people have dropped her. And this agency who's actually said to her, stop moaning, you know, now you've got to be happy and positive because everyone's getting fed up with it. Let's start again. So she got very close up to Harry and dragged him along to all these dancing and singing and all that sort of stuff. But if he now feels he's got an even harder job to do to get her famous and in terms of what she's doing, not just because she's married to Harry, it's going to be difficult.
Do you think there's a chance that the talent agency might...
Remember what I said, are egoistic. If you're not true to your principles, right? And people can disagree with you, but if you're not true to your principles and you're fake, one, it's obvious, and two, a lot of times bad things will happen to you. A curse. Don't be so egotistic. Be more helpful for people. And, you know, don't try to be the center of attention in everything. But because of Meghan being the way she is, right? She comes off very, very fake. It's not just a perception, it's reality. Right? It seems like it's reality. I don't think it's a perception issue. It's really a reality issue, right? Of her personality. But she's emblematic of a culture that is taking Western society, modern society, off the railroad tracks. And this is the reason why I'm playing Royal Watcher, because we can learn something from these types of people. What not to do. Back to the Royal Watcher.
Drop back a mask.
Yes, why on earth are they saying that? They keep quiet.
The royals have not responded to the allegations or claims made in Endgame, and author Omid Scobie blamed a translation error made by the publisher. Recently, animated American sitcom Family Guy took aim at Harry and Meghan for their lucrative Netflix deal and partnerships.
That's fine, I'll go it alone, just like Meghan Markle and Prince Harry.
Sir, your millions from Netflix for no one knows what.
Put it with the rest of them.
Babe, time to do our daily $250,000 sponsored Instagram post for Del Taco.
I shouldn't have left the made-up nonsense.
Sky News host Rita Panahi described Endgame as a catastrophe.
Is the new book about Harry and Meghan and the end of the royal family. It is called Endgame. It's garbage.
But we have decided to take one for the team. We're going to read it so you don't have to. We are going to take you through the best or worst bits of this catastrophe. And I think this is going to get us into heaven, Paul.
Let us hold hands and go through the pearly gates. It's written by a bloke who is clearly very Harry and Meghan centric.
Oh, he's their unofficial spokesperson. And I tell you, we have taken one for the team here. We've read this catastrophe, so you don't have to.
Thank you so much. We begin Endgame with, if you could all please turn your hymn books to page. It isn't even numbered. That's a good sign. All right.
Good start.
So this is all apparently about the end of the royal family, in part because of their attitude towards Harry and Meghan. Endgame. The final stages of a chess game after most of the pieces have been removed from the board. Also, the final stages of an extended process or course of events.
I think it's not a good sign when you start your book with a dictionary definition of the title of your book.
It's a little bit like,
it's like you've already run out of ideas, you've already run out of your own words. Let's start Googling what our title of the book is and what it means, and put that into the first page.
It's like a year 6 speech, you know.
Yeah.
Freedom. The Oxford Dictionary says freedom. All right, now.
Let's see if it gets any better.
I have no doubt.
Page 7, part of the prologue.
Please do.
And it's, I think this is all about the king. The question remains, is he up for the job? Immediately after the Queen passed away and ordinary citizens were still shedding tears, the new King Charles made headlines after cameras caught him throwing a tantrum over a faulty pen. A stubborn eccentric who has spent most of his life waiting and planning for his ascension, even at the cost of his relationship with his own sons, the former Prince of Wales, is not only far less popular than his predecessor and his successor,
his mother,
and his son. He has also been a thorn in the side of the institution. It's interesting that he focuses here on that pen incident.
Yes.
And you can understand why the king was upset. I mean, they had planned for that day for possibly decades.
His mother's just left us.
And the pen doesn't work when he's got to sign a vital document. I would have thought if you're going to talk about the the king now being a bit kooky, you might, I don't know, reflect on wanting to come back as a tampon, have that.
Talking to plants,
the whole global warming.
This is an important for the ones that just went, the ones that just joined us on X. So you know, I'm doing kind of a critique of Meghan Markle and Harry as a royal watcher, just as a funny piece, as we were talking about, you know, the crisis in Israel. But there is something to be learned from the incident with these royals. All right, and I'm being serious now. The king in the pen incident, most people have seen the video, and that he has been waiting to be quote king for a long time. He's been waiting for, you know, his mother to die, right? The queen. And it is so fitting to see him have his tantrums when certain things were going wrong during the coronation or during the signing of the documents, because there was a whole bunch of stuff that had to take place, you know, as he was moving into kingship. And his personality comes out. And these self-centered individuals, you know, how egoism at the individual level or egoism at the societal level bad things can happen. Some are very benign, like ink leaking, you know, leaking out on his finger. But other things can be more malignant, like war and destruction. And I think people need to realize that egoism, self-centeredness, and not, you know, realizing that we can be cursed and blessed. And if we do the right thing, we do get blessed, but we shouldn't be doing the right thing to be blessed. We should be doing the right thing because it is the right thing to do. And that we're not looking for a reward. But a blessing does happen. And to just do the right thing and not look in terms of reward. And then through that, a better blessing comes down. And it's sometimes hard to describe this because it's very metaphysical and we live in a cause and effect world on this plane. But you kind of see this playing out with these royals as their structure starts to slowly crumble in front of us.
Guilty of making every 12 months we're at the end of the world. But no, we don't have any of that.
No, the pen
is the where Charles is demonized.
You see, you don't understand. You see, the pen's mightier than the sword of which a king or queen wields to make people knights of the realm. See, this guy's got 4D chess. That's why he mentioned chess at the start of his book.
It's all coming together, Paul. This is spooky. I'm getting tingles now, people. I'm getting tingles.
All right, so that's episode of The Royal Watcher. Now what we want to do is go back to Al Jazeera and get higher blood pressure.
Is seeing a change in the dynamic of the US position, particularly listening to what we heard tonight in the Security Council?
Well, certainly I think we've seen a slight change from
those
very early days when we
get out your magnifying glass.
Those early days when President Biden went to visit the Israelis, and it was full-throated support for Israel in every single way. And in terms of Israel's right to defend itself, and they haven't completed their military objectives, that's still there. But there is a slight note now, which we've seen developing in recent weeks, of urging caution on Israel. They repeatedly say that there are laws to war and Israel needs to respect them. What they never say is Israel is not respecting them. They never actually call out Israel for that. Some tough comments or tougher comments on the situation in the West Bank, but no comments on what so many people around the world, so many lawyers, so many human rights groups say are war crimes.
Marwan, we have seen historically moments where US presidents were able to draw something of a red line for Israel. What's happened now?
Well, look, I mean, just quickly, Biden started with a hyperbole. Hamas is like ISIL. We support Israel 100%. We're going to send them arms, a lot of money, billions of dollars. We're sending 2 armadas, 2 aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and so on and so forth. We went from that kind of hyperbole, that kind of support, that kind of no daylight.
No.
to
the aircraft carriers and the nuclear subs are to deal with the potentiality of a much larger conflict. And so we're not caught off guard, especially if it needs to escalate towards Iran. That's why they're there, not because of Hamas. Now, this brings up the bigger question. Should this war, which I think it should this war be elevated to attacking Hezbollah and Iran at the same time? And I take the stance, yes. So, you know, their positioning in the Middle East with the aircraft carriers and the nuclear subs is prudent, especially if there needs to be air support or, you know, an offensive attack on Iran. And not just that, the Turkey president, the Hezbollah spokesperson, and the Iranian spokesperson all said in a relatively short amount of time the same thing, that this was going to be a much bigger conflict if Israel keeps on attacking Gaza. So, you know what, aren't we supposed to believe what these spokespeople are saying? If you have a spokesperson that's saying, oh, we're prepared to kill you and make this a global event, you know, shouldn't you take some of the things that they're saying to heart and prepare? I would think so.
Support 100%, but the poor Palestinians, we need to give them some aid, some help, perhaps some food before we kill them. Why bomb them when they're starving? Let's kill them as they have on full stomach, and so on and so forth. We went through the humanitarian. I think now, at this point in time, we are in the helpless American position. We went from hyperbole to humanitarian to the helpless. Americans are helpless. They cannot influence Israel to do what Israel needs to do in Gaza. And hence, they are either changing the subject to weaponize, for example, rape, and start talking for all of a sudden about rape, or they're talking about the West Bank and hooligans in the West Bank, because they can no longer talk in serious face about what's happening in Gaza.
It's about the battle between the children of Jacob and the children of Esau. And it's battle royale, it's cage match, right? Battle to the death, all right? That's what's playing out here. And Esau is antithetical to Western values.
In Gaza, they're complicit and they can't change Israel's policy, Israel's war policy. And hence they are changing the subject. And hence they are found in such helpless position where they stand unique almost, along with their puppy, the European puppy, everyone who knows who that is. But they stand uniquely alone now in the international community.
That's interesting. I think we've got very briefly in 20 seconds, James. How's that impacting the US position in the UN? All the momentum after the Ukraine war that we saw.
Really damaged. Their political capital is really damaged, particularly with the global south. It would be very interesting to see if there was a vote in the General Assembly on Ukraine now, compared with the vote that took place in March of last year, whether there be so much support for Ukraine. It's President Zelensky's worst nightmare in many ways, what has happened in terms of Gaza. And I think it's difficult now for the United States to get things done in the United Nations as a result of what's happened.
Okay, we're going to have to thank James Baines and Marwan Bashar. Thank you both.
The thing is the assumption is that to get things done under the foundation of a Westphalian pragmatic expedient solution, but it doesn't solve the problem. Not all problems can be solved the same way. And this is a very unique situation that is transpiring. Something that is what I would call biblical. But it's a profound thing that is happening, very metaphysical that's happening. And if you don't like it, if it's not fitting in the box of what normally the UN is dealing with, then it must be someone else's fault. Well, maybe it's the perspective of the people working in the UN trying to solve a problem that can't be solved with the tools that they have. battle royale, you know, in this whole thing, and you know, just let them duke it out.
We're back at the top of the hour.
In unsettled times, upfront takes on the big issues.
There is a context to what is happening now. It is a context of repression, occupation, and apartheid.
Unflinching questions, rigorous debate.
The reality today is that another ethnic cleansing is taking place in Gaza. Nothing goes into Gaza without Israel's permission. Nothing leaves Gaza without Israel's permission.
Allow me to push back for a moment.
Demanding a ceasefire, demanding an end to the root causes of all of this violence.
Upfront on Al Jazeera.
What you're looking at there is one of the breach points through which.
All right, so I'm gonna do a commercial here. This is PNN. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol that I have. It is a strong antioxidant and it helps to get rid of senescent cells. This is a great add-on to the protocol for the anti-aging and to, you know, boost up your health. I have vitamin D3. It helps to absorb calcium. It is vitamin D3 is also a gene expression cofactor, and it will help to get rid of apoptosis cells. You know, if the cell needs to go through apoptosis, especially if it's been infected through a pathogen, one of the things that you need is D3 that will help to get rid of it. All right, on top of, you know, a boost immune system. Turmeric, very important to bring down that inflammation. It's also an antioxidant. If you notice the theme of my anti-aging protocol, it's about boosting the immune system, neutralizing pathogens, bringing down that chronic inflammatory, pro-inflammatory response, bringing down the reactive oxygen species, the free radicals, by taking the C60, and boosting up that immune system. Right? Neutralize pathogens with structural nanosilver liquids and gels. Take the C60 to soak up those free radicals, and take the turmeric and ashwagandha to bring down that pro-inflammatory response. All right, and that'll go a long way in improving your health. But you add in stuff like multivitamins and B complex and the D3 and the resveratrol to boost it up, right? You do this regularly, you are going to improve your health, boost up your immune system, and slow down the aging process. It's about proper diet, proper exercise, proper supplementation, proper brain challenging, proper, stretching and balancing exercises. Don't get too crazy. You don't have to be a yoga expert, but balancing will slow down the aging process, because your cerebellum starts to age and you start to lose your balance. Your cerebellum is what actually helps you with your balance. So one of the signs of aging is gait, the way that people, the elderly walk. They walk slower, they have problems with balance. These are the early signs of Parkinson's. So, just doing balancing exercises and proper sleep and diet and supplementation will mitigate some of these age-related problems that people are having. And a lot of people don't think about that. So, if you listen to what I have to say about taking care of your health, it'll go a long way. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and follow my protocol. My products that I have are very high quality, extremely high quality. All right. Please support my work by subscribing to all 3 channels on YouTube. I did a video with Peter Duke a couple nights ago. I published it on YouTube. It was taken down. YouTube gave me a strike on my small channel on YouTube. I took the other video that was on the medium-sized channel down so I wouldn't get the strike. So unfortunately, I can't replay the video that I did for Peter on his book that he did on YouTube. So please watch that video on Rumble, Bitchute, and Brighteon. This is the reason why it's so important that you subscribe to all 6 channels that I have. I have 3 channels on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please subscribe. All of those links are in this video and all my videos. So click the link, subscribe. Please have your social network follow me. Please have them follow me on X, have them follow me on GETTR, have them follow me on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. All right. Give them the links, ask them to follow. Please share my videos, especially the ones that are on Rumble, because those stay up. Sometimes sensitive information, especially about the aftershock from the pandemic, some of those videos get taken down on YouTube because of it's sensitive information that I'm providing. So please follow me, have your social network, follow me. I'm censored heavily, all right? Especially on the science side of the stuff that I talk about. And please go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And if you can, to help support my news coverage, please donate on Stripe or PayPal. You can donate on my website, or you can donate through Buy Me a Coffee. Link is in the description of this video. Or you can be a paid subscriber to my Patreon channel as a paid member, and that will help to support my news coverage. All my coverage about the news, about how to improve your health through the aftershock of the crisis, this post era, this issue that's going on with the geopolitical things that are happening in the world with Israel and with China and with Europe, all these important things, what's happening in the finance. If you pay attention to what I have to say, you're going to learn a lot. All right. So please help support, share the links, and all that information that I make is free for everybody, because I believe that if I'm going to say something that is critiquing the news or trying to inform you about your health or your finances, it's important that I provide that information for free. All right. I don't put anything behind a paywall. So please help support my work so that that service to everybody is maintained. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening on Spaces. I appreciate everyone that comes in on Spaces. It's hard to get a good following on Spaces, but I do appreciate the ones that come in and do listen. So thank you for listening, and have a nice day.